Hello, and welcome to the Art of Presence podcast. I'm your host, Christine Pollard. On today's episode, I'm joined by Samantha, and she just so happens to be my twin sister. We talk about our experiences in childhood, touching a bit on bullying and handling emotions, and how differently we experienced some of the same situations. I invite you to notice what comes up for you as you listen, noticing for anything that may or may not resonate, and feel welcome to share with us. You will find us just after we have finished a meditation to bring us into the present moment. I hope you enjoy the episode. All right, so we just finished the meditation. So now I ask you, what's present for you right now? It may be a sensation, a feeling, a thought, a story, a theme. What's arising in you?
The desire for an agenda.
Oh, yeah.
Or just
Okay.
thinking
Tell me more.
Different topics I want to talk about. Things that just kind of like conversations that I feel like we haven't had or that we've kind of like scratched the surface of, but haven't like talked a lot about.
Mm-hmm. So I hear this, well, because this is a different sort of podcast. It's not typical. Usually there's a topic that we're talking about. And so this is different. And so you notice that kind of impulse to have an agenda, to have like a prompt or something to guide us, and that this podcast is about, whatever is arising is the guide. And so I hear a curiosity in you that, so for those of you listening, we are sisters, that we've had some conversations and that we've kind of touched on some things but haven't really gone into. And so I hear a curiosity there, that there are things in you. Is there something in particular that's kind of shouting out at you?
Well, I mean, a few things. Just a note about what you just said is I was talking about this idea of interviewing recently, like for a job, and how I feel like I don't interview very well because I don't do super well with unprompted, unscripted, kind of like spur of the moment things that are kind of like high pressure, high stakes. I just like my anxiety rises and, I'll ask you a simple question like, tell me about a challenge you've had in the workplace and how you navigated that, right? And it's like, we all have those stories, but like in the moment, if you're not prepared for that question, for me, I just don't think very quickly on my feet. And I have been in interviews before where they've given me the questions in advance, but those questions were given to me like as I was in the waiting room, right? Like 15 minutes before or something when the anxiety is already up. And I just think about, I'm like, well, not every single job requires somebody to think like that. You know what I mean? To be able to just kind of like give their best in an impromptu, spontaneous questions that you don't know in advance, right? So like, what's the point of having an interview set up like that and not giving interview questions like 24 hours in advance if the job doesn't require that kind of skill? You know what I mean? So I just think I'm just relating that a little bit to, meetings and podcasts and things like that without an agenda. And it can be it's a little tricky for me. But if there's a particular theme that's been coming up for me recently and something that we've also kind of touched on in some of our informal texting conversations and things. It's like this theme about like bullies. And it's kind of been, like consuming a lot of my mental energy lately. I don't know. Thought maybe we could talk about that. It's kind of something that's
Yeah.
sure.
Can I touch on what you've shared already? Because I hear how helpful it is for you to prepare, especially when it's like a high stakes scenario. And when preparing for an interview, like if you can get the questions early, if, thinking quickly on your feet isn't part of the job description. And it just reminded me of something I've been trying to practice lately, which is pausing. And it just made me think how our society does kind of want immediate answers and expect, like the best of you to always be showing up, and how, if we felt okay enough, if we felt that it was okay to pause and take a breath and actually like think and respond instead of having like
Mm-hmm.
an answer ready to go, right? Because when you get asked, oh, what's something recently, and it's like, oh, now I have to think of something recently, and then I know for me, when I get in that place, I'm like, oh, something recent, something recent, something recent. I can't even think. The only thing I'm thinking of
so
is
my whole
what's
mind
recent.
just goes blank and shuts down, and it's like I don't know. I guess I'm just gonna make something up that
Right.
hasn't been recent, that I've had a lot more time to reflect on. If I can, even think of something there. Yeah, it's strange. It's a strange experience. And that's the thing too, is like it's that I think a lot about the like thinking on your feet thing, and I can do that in familiar and comfortable environments, right? I can do that in environments where I feel safe or competent, but that's not usually an interview environment. So that's why, again, like when you come to these things that are less familiar, right? It's like that's when that anxiety, I call it anxiety because I feel like that's the only thing I really know how to call it. That's the only, I think, experience that I have when like I just stop thinking and can't, it's like, I don't know if it's a freeze response to, an anxiety provoking situation. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's just like mind, it's just shut off and everything else is like on high alert.
Yeah. Because like you said, that like high stakes is like, oh, I have to find something worthy. I have to say it competently. I have to, appear a certain way. Uh, it has to be
Right.
a good answer.
Yeah.
Like these judgments, right?
Yeah.
But you were talking about this theme of bullying. What comes up for
Well,
you around that?
I just feel like I've been thinking a lot about current and past situations where I've just felt kind of bulldozed, right? Or excluded, or just like scenario situations, and just trying to figure out like what it looks like to deal with those situations in a way that's like helpful for me. I'm just thinking through bullying experiences, if you will, in adulthood, and then trying to trace back where that started and first experiences with that. And I've just been in the last year putting myself in a lot of places and situations that are very unfamiliar for me, but things that I have wanted to experience for a long time, or things that I just didn't experience when I was younger, and now in my 30s I'm like, I want to know this, I want to experience this. And so while that's been really enriching and fun, enlightening in a lot of ways, there's always a growth curve when you're doing a lot of unfamiliar things, you know, even if they're like really simple. And so I find myself triggered a lot when I go into a situation like this and it doesn't really go as planned, or like I feel some sense of like rejection or not belonging. Like, this just isn't for me. I don't belong here. Because of maybe ways that people respond to me, react to me in those spaces in ways that aren't very pleasant, you know? And so I've just been kind of recently connecting, like I've known this trigger, this like non-belonging trigger for a while. I'm only just now kind of connecting that to like experiences of like bullying. And so it's just been something that's been coming up a lot for me lately. And I know we talked about, I mentioned to you, I don't know, last week or something, like, did we ever talk about this one girl, you know, this friend that we had back in like first and second grade, kindergarten, I think, even earlier than that, we knew her. And have we ever talked about her? And you were like, no, why? You know? And I'm like, well, our friendship with her was like a very, it was really, I perceived it as being really mean. She was just really mean. She was really mean to me. And I'd kind of place that as kind of the first, one of the earliest experiences that I can recall of feeling bullied. And so I don't know. Just, I know you didn't experience her the same way, and that was kind of surprising to me.
Yeah. I don't remember well, I don't remember much. I really don't remember much from childhood, but there are maybe a couple memories that involve her. And what I remember the most is just this kind of felt sense, not anything specific that was like said or done. But just this like body memory of not, I don't know. I mean, being self-centered, which is pretty normal for that age. But yeah, a little more on the meaner side. It's so funny because I don't, it's like mean isn't the word that I would describe, but unkind, but I think we associate unkind with being mean. So it's just interesting that when you say mean, like that doesn't resonate exactly, or maybe when I think of it in like a bullying term or way, like I didn't feel picked on, like I didn't feel targeted, but I didn't feel that she was someone that I'm like,
right,
yeah, you're a great friend.
Yeah,
you know?
I did experience, and I do remember like some specific instances, but I did experience like targeted meanness, like exclusion, very specific. Like, everyone else gets this special thing, but you don't. Or, you know what I mean? Like, everyone else gets an invitation to XYZ thing, but you don't. And having that kind of like told to my face. I just remember situations like that, specifically in second grade. And it's so weird to like think back that far and to, you know, feel like any of that matters. But those are the kinds of things that start at a very early age, making you feel unworthy of connection, you know?
Right. Right. For sure. These are the developmental years. It's how we start to perceive ourselves and develop our sense of self is when we're little. I mean, it's foundational. And so when our early experiences are like that, you know, that is what is informing us of who we are, at least in our mind, our perceptions, our beliefs, and yeah, it starts so early. I was sharing with you. I want to come back to this, but to illustrate how, like, noticing at age 4 that I had already emotionally shut down. Like, I can see that clearly. So there were things already that I was perceiving or believing about myself, right? And 4, it was probably even before that. It's just that's like my earliest memory. And so, yeah, second grade.
It's a few years later. Yeah, 8.
That's what we were, like, 8.
Right. And that friendship didn't start in second grade. So there were definitely things happening before that too.
No, yeah.
But I'm curious, you said your earliest memory. Does that mean your earliest memory of like shutting down emotionally, or like your earliest memory, period?
I think I have a very brief flash of a memory when, I don't know if we were 2 or 3, based off of a picture that we have, but like I can see slightly more than, beyond what's in the picture in my head as a memory. That's fading, actually. Like, I remember having that memory, and as I try to recall it now, it's harder. But the one when we were 4 is still very
Do you want to share what that memory is?
clear in my mind. Yeah, we were moving. So it was after our parents divorced. We were moving. We were in the car. And I remember asking Mom, like, is Dad coming with us? And she was just like, no, he's not coming. I was like, okay. Just had like no feeling whatsoever. Just like, okay. If anything, there might have been a little bit of relief because the circumstances around the divorce were not good. So I think maybe there was a sense of slight, like, at least now when I'm putting myself in that place, I sense a slight feeling of relief.
Mm-hmm.
But there was no sadness. There was no curiosity. There was no, it was just a kind of blank. Okay. And I don't remember much after that, but I don't remember ever really, the things that I felt were extremes. It's like if I was really afraid, or if I was super excited, or if I was so sad, like tears would burst out because I literally couldn't hold them back anymore. Stuff like that. But I remember just being really...
That's interesting.
Shut down.
I mean, I know we're not identical twins, but we're twins, and those very early experiences, like, we had them all together. There was probably not a lot of experiences that we individually had where you weren't next to me and I wasn't next to you, before we started school. And so to see the ways that both of us, like, kind of experience that in opposite ways. Because for me, like, I was always seen as being too sensitive. So I was the emotional one. I was over emotional and like sad all the time. And I, still can struggle with feeling too much. And it can be really like disorienting when you're older to kind of feel like, what is a normal experience? What is a normal, like, there is no real normal, I don't think, but it can still be really confusing to feel like, am I overreacting? Am I underreacting? Like, what is an appropriate emotional response to this situation? And I'm not sure that there's even an answer to that, or if it's like, well, whatever you feel, and I get that. But I'm also like, emotional dysregulation can cause a lot of issues in your life. So like you have to have some kind of a
Right.
healthy baseline, and not knowing where that is or how to get there, can be interesting because you don't have anybody else's experience. You can listen to other people share, and depending on their self-awareness, they may or not even like really have a true grasp on things, or it's such a subjective thing that it can be hard to, in my mind, kind of understand what is an appropriate and healthy range of responses, be emotional responding. You know what I mean? So,
Can I say a little
yeah,
bit?
please.
Yeah, because I don't know what age this started, but I remember seeing, maybe hearing, I don't know, but mostly witnessing you struggling with your feelings, that the adults saw you as, too sensitive or too emotional, and that I witnessed that, and I witnessed that they didn't know what to do. And so for me, because I could see you weren't getting the support that you needed. Even as a little kid, like I didn't have this language, but like this knowing, right? And I was already dealing with shame and embarrassment because I sucked my thumb. And that was something that was also judged. That I was like, I'm not going to let anyone have any more ammo to judge me with. So I specifically shut down my feelings so that I wouldn't be viewed in that way. I didn't want to be seen that way. And I was also caretaking. Like I was caretaking mom. Because I could see it was hard for her, and I didn't want that for her, and I didn't want that for me. And so I just tried to be quiet and agreeable. And so then I got along with everybody well enough because I just tried to blend in.
Mm-hmm.
But then I lost me in the process. But even at that early age, knowing the effects of shame and embarrassment, to know to shut down, to me says a lot about how we internalize things, how we form beliefs about ourselves, how we see the world. And without that guidance of, feeling, like without having that space that it was okay that you had a lot of feelings, that it was overwhelming, that you didn't know what to do with them. Like there was no support for that. Not maliciously, I didn't see mom, at least I didn't see her as not being okay with feelings, just not knowing what to do with them, not knowing how to support. And seeing her, not really being able to do that for herself.
Yeah.
Either.
I think it's a mix of both, because like she had no problem telling me I was too sensitive. So, in my mind, she still doesn't. And in my mind, that is kind of a judgment of, sure, she didn't know what to do with it either, but had she been better equipped, would that have changed how she perceived it? I don't know.
Yeah. I know for me, now being a parent and having been really shut down and not knowing about feelings for myself, and not being able to, not making space for my own feelings, there was no space for my kids' feelings. And so that was something that I really set out to change, which has been huge. sometimes still a struggle though, because even though I've worked through a lot of these layers, there are some ways that my kids' feelings come out that are really hard to be with. And some are easier than others. But that took a lot for me to unlearn, relearn, practice, and to not judge, right? Because I'm hearing that the judgmental piece about feelings, when we judge the feeling as either good or bad or too much, they are judgments. But it's more really information about the other person, not you. It's you're too sensitive for me. You're too emotional for me to be able to handle. Whereas you, I see it now anyway, as this culmination of so much feeling, overwhelm, whatever, that never got tended to. And it just built up and built up and built up. And like, where's it supposed to go? You can only hold on to it for so long. And so even though I stuffed it to my own detriment, it had its own consequences, you were able to let it out, but then it was judged, or it was unsupported, or it wasn't met. What comes up for you when I say that?
Sorry, I have a little chest pain.
Did that just start?
I'm okay. It passed.
I saw you gave it a little attention, like you put your hand there and took a breath. Take your time. Are you still feeling judged for having feeling?
I don't think so, but I feel very overwhelmed by that. Not so much now,
in this
but
moment?
In my life, I feel, especially after everything that's happened this year, I feel a lot of things, a lot of different things. Sometimes all at once, sometimes in rapid succession. And it brings up a lot of past feelings. So I'm not just dealing with like stuff that's happened recently and my feelings about that, but
a whole flood
and just
of
right. It just kind of feels
emotion.
like it's all bubbling up. And yeah, I don't have the capacity to, I feel like, be with anybody else, to be with anybody else's feelings. Or else that capacity is just very diminished right now. And I feel like that puts a strain on my other relationships, which is hard. I went through a similar thing when I went through my divorce. It was about 3 years ago now. I felt comfortable, like, withdrawing. First of all, we were, like, in the middle of COVID, and so there wasn't a lot of opportunity for or ability to really connect with people in any way other than, like, virtually at the time, And so it felt okay for me to just kind of withdraw and be isolated, and that's kind of just how I deal with pain, which is probably not okay, but at the same time, I just felt like, I was like, I just feel a lot more guilt right now because I'm in a relationship and I have a job that I go to every day. I am around people all the time. And I can't isolate, I can't just have my feelings, be alone. And so yeah. And then, of course, like in early 2021, when I went through my divorce, like, well, I didn't have a partner anymore that I had to kind of tend to, right? Or a relationship to nourish. So I could spend a lot of my own emotional energy just dealing with me and my stuff. I'm not sure I did that very well, but at the very least, I wasn't, putting a ton of strain on my personal relationships. And now I just don't feel like I can do that. I don't have the ability to do that. And so now I'm dealing with, like, going through the loss of a parent and feeling all this obligation to be tending to other people and other responsibilities. And I just am overwhelmed. I don't know how you do it with 3
And that makes
kids and a
sense.
husband and a mother who lives 10 minutes away.
Yeah. I would say the difference is the last 6 years I've spent an immense amount of time in spaces that make space for my feelings, to where I've been able to unload a lot of that. Because it's not just therapy. I mean, I find therapy to be helpful too, but it's
Right.
a relational space, which has been different for me. And so one thing that stood out to me about what you were saying was, to be alone, to have feelings, you need that alone time. And it just made me curious about what what it was like for you as a child. Like, if you're only able to have feelings alone, like if that's something that's been internalized, or like an imprint or something that feelings are meant to be felt alone.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's probably from a lot of experiences, but I really have not felt safe in most places, in most relationships. Certainly didn't feel safe in school, with friends, to emote. I did a little bit in college,
Right.
but even then, like, a lot of those friendships ended, when I left an institutionalized, formalized religion, when I left that particular, group. And so, in some senses, I look back on those times when I felt emotionally safe and supported, and I just wonder how genuine that is. If it's like, you're just going to cut your friendship off with me once I stop believing the same things you do. So I don't know that diminishes what I felt in the moment. But, immediately after college, I didn't feel safe again.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, the only times I've kind of felt safe to open up about feelings has been like in a romantic relationship, in my marriage, my previous marriage, and sometimes now in my current relationship. But I don't know. It's not 100%, I don't know that anyone's 100%, like, because everybody has their own stuff going on too. So they can't always hold space for you. I have a really hard time holding space for other people when I'm overwhelmed with my own stuff. So, I mean, I get it. But I think sometimes the unpredictability of feelings, I think that's just kind of, my experience is that it's kind of unpredictable. I don't know if that's other people's experiences, but I find that that can feel one way one day and a completely different way another day. And then maybe an entirely different way the next day. And that's really confusing for my partner. And I'm like, you don't have this experience? Why is this confusing to you? Like, you don't ever have a bad day? You're never in a bad mood? Like, so yeah, I think sometimes I am like, well, if I'm not pleasant, or if I'm not going to be a pleasant experience for somebody else, I'm just gonna withdraw and till I feel better. So I don't know if that's a way of people pleasing. It's a way of like kind of, or if that's just avoidance, or if there's a connection between avoidance, people pleasing, or if it's something else entirely. But I'm just like, I don't like putting myself in a position to potentially be hurt when I'm already hurting.
Yeah. That makes sense. And I see this like impulse to almost pathologize and like, is this response okay or is it not okay? Does it mean something bad about me or not? Does it, doom my relationship, or, is there something wrong with me? That's what I hear. And how I honor the wise adaptation your body has come up with, because in order to protect yourself, withdrawing was what you needed to do. And I hear you questioning. I hear it as more of that, is there something wrong with me? Should I be doing something different to be doing it the right way or whatever? But underneath that, I hear this maybe quiet curiosity of, is this working for me? Can I do something that will work better?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess when I think about it, I spent a lot of time alone and sad when I was little. A lot. But
I was just noticing, like when I started saying that, there seemed to be like kind of a wave of emotion. And I've noticed, some of the tears, and which I welcome. There's nothing wrong with them. And I'm curious. It seems to me, I don't know if this is right. Let me know if this is accurate for you. It seems like a release. And as I see them, I'm curious, and you don't have to answer this, but if the tears could speak, what would they say?
I don't know. I don't know how to answer that.
It's okay. Because I see this like kind of wave of emotion come up, and then it seems kind of like, again, let me know if this is accurate. It appears like this impulse to kind of like stop it or slow it down, or like, like not exactly shut it down, but like make it less. Does that resonate at all?
Yeah. It doesn't ever work. If you're wondering. Yeah, I like stop breathing. Usually I'm like catching myself not breathing because I'm just like trying to hold it together. Yeah.
Hold it back. Do you feel it in your throat too?
I don't usually, feel it in my chest.
Okay. I didn't know if there was like it seemed like, I'm curious because this will happen to me sometimes. The trying to sound like I'm not crying. Do you do that ever? Like,
I think that I try so hard to just like hold it in that I'm not really thinking about what I sound like. It's like something I don't have a lot of control over. I don't know. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I guess in that way, maybe my throat constricts a little bit and changes how my voice sounds, but I think that's pretty normal to sound like you're crying, you know?
Oh yeah.
I've always wondered how, like, I
Right.
mean, I know that they're acting, but how, people in movies or whatever can have this little, like, teardrop flowing down their face, but, like, no other kind of indicator of, no other physical indicator of, like, sadness or distress. I'm like, how does that little tear just stroll down your face like that? You don't have, like, any kind of forehead, scrunching. There's no sniffles. Like, you know what I mean? I'm like,
Your
right.
voice isn't
Like, all of
quivering or
that.
anything.
I don't know if that's real. I don't think so. But yeah.
Yeah. It took me until maybe the last 2 years where in certain groups I can cry freely without feeling like I need to stop it or like get myself together before I keep sharing. And that was a big kind of like indicator for me. I'm like, oh, I'm feeling,
Yeah.
I'm feeling. I'm letting myself feel and I'm not embarrassed by it anymore. Like before there was embarrassment, and embarrassment has been kind of the main driver for how I would show up. And so,
Yeah, I could see a lot of that in me too, but I don't know that it's not the same. I don't know. Or maybe, I mean, because no two people's experience with a particular thing is ever going to be the same. So, but I don't necessarily mean it like that. I just, like,
right.
I can see the differences for us. I wasn't ashamed or afraid or embarrassed of what I felt or of emoting, I guess. But I guess maybe the things that I felt shame about were maybe different.
Did you ever feel like made fun of? Or was it mostly the kind of more exclusion meanness?
I don't think I felt made fun of. Yeah. Is that what it was for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really remember people laughing at me or things like that, but I just remember being excluded all the time, being alone a lot. And, I don't know if it was a lack of self awareness or what, but I don't really even know why. When I think back on it, I'm not really sure why kids didn't like me. Maybe you don't. Maybe you do. I mean, maybe when we got older, like junior high, I mean, I can definitely look at, like, some kind of maybe more specific things. But, like, as a little kid, what is there about somebody that little kids don't like? You know what I mean? There's nothing about a little kid in first
Yeah.
grade that's not likable. Or, you know what I mean? That's not like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah. No, for me it was being laughed at. It was being made fun of.
Was it about the sucking your
So
thumb
like
thing?
that was one thing, we moved, we had southern accents and people would they would almost get like I remember someone getting like mad at us for like a kid getting mad at us for not pronouncing it the right way. They're like, that's not how you say it. I was just like, oh, but it was the adults that thought it was so cute.
I do remember that, but
and they'd like chuckle about it. And for me, that was just like,
that's funny.
Mortifying. Cause I'm like, this is just
right
how I talk, but like, I just noticed people commenting on it, just how I noticed people commenting on your feelings or commenting on me sucking my thumb. People would, I think part of it was because I was shut down and I was trying so hard to not be seen because I didn't want to be criticized, that when anyone pointed out something like that, I just felt so embarrassed that I was like, oh, you weren't supposed to see that, you know? And then when people would point things out, it was just like, yeah, so I just tried to not be seen, and if I had to be seen, I had to be like really good at whatever it was I was being seen in. You know, like worth the attention.
Not negative attention.
You know, because I didn't want any
Yeah,
no
you don't
negative
want any
attention.
negative attention.
Exactly.
I didn't care what kind of attention I got. I just wanted it. Which is why I didn't have a problem emoting. I remember being the kid carried out of the church sanctuary because I was throwing a fit. I remember being that kid. Oh,
I don't remember.
I remember
happening
very, very clearly. Yeah,
I trust you.
At First Lutheran in the big echoey sanctuary, just screaming, throwing a huge fit, and having to be carried out. Yeah, it's so funny too because I was like, I put myself back in that situation. I was like, I know exactly what I was doing. There are just times when I feel like I'm acting like I'm out of control, but I'm like kind of in control here. I don't know. That makes no sense. It's a weird experience to kind of be like, I'm just gonna let it all out because who gives a rat's ass, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I just remember like I was so shut down. And in high school, I started tearing up at a movie. I don't even remember which one it was. And I was like, what's happening to me? I'm crying. Isn't there like something wrong with me? I'm like, what's happening to me? Now I cry all the time, but I was like shocked. I was concerned for myself. I didn't understand what was happening.
I cried at movies all the time. That's funny. Yeah.
I do now. Yeah. But yeah.
It's just funny how like different people have different judgments of the same experience, different interpretations of the same experience. Like you're like, what's wrong with me? I'm crying. And I'm like, what's wrong with me? I'm not crying. You know? But
yeah.
Yeah.
Can I speak to another thing that you said? You're talking about like the obligation of like holding, you know, like supporting others, but then when you were overwhelmed, you know, how like you can't do that, but that they're, I don't remember exactly how you said it, but I remember you mentioning the word obligation, and that stood out to me.
Yeah, I mean, when you enter in...
Oh, obligation to tend to others.
Sure. I mean, you know, when you commit yourself to a partnership or you have a really like people facing job. I mean, I've been a teacher for 12 years. You're kind of committing yourself to some degree of availability for them, you know, and that's different depending on the actual relationship you have with somebody, whether that's your student, your boss, your friend, or your partner. And it can be difficult to have any kind of room on my plate to support anyone else when I'm dealing with pretty severe loss and, you know, experiencing a lot of grief. And by obligations, I just mean responsibilities. I mean, commitments that you make to people. And you're right. There's not a lot of space in our society to just let people feel. And if there's no space for mine, then I have a hard time having space for anybody else. Because
Right.
if nobody
Of
else can
course.
support me, then I have to support me. And then that means I don't have room to support anybody else. Because all my energy and attention is going to getting me through today without having a breakdown. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, especially now being removed from some stuff. But or just more time distance from some things, but I can still be pulled back pretty easily into some grief. And then how much longer is it going to be acceptable for me to be like, I'm just sad. I'm just thinking about Dad a lot today. I'm just waiting. If I'm being honest, I'm waiting for somebody to say you need to get over it.
Mm.
It's been XYZ months. Time to move on.
Mm. That is how our culture sees it.
So it's easier for me to just pretend like I've had a bad day at work, like work is stressing me out, or it's easier to just say I'm tired or whatever, because I'm just waiting for the shoe to drop,
Because there's like more understanding for you when you say those things than if you were to be honest about what's really bothering you. Like if people's compassion runs out because it's like, oh, it's that again. Oh, okay.
And if I'm being honest, like I still have feelings about my divorce. That happened 3 years ago, and I feel like I can't talk about those. Mm-hmm. That's for sure. So it's just really frustrating when things continue to affect you and there isn't really much compassion or understanding for it until somebody else, or unless somebody else has been through or goes through it themselves, But even then, when they go through it, it's not the same. Not everybody experiences the divorce the way that I experienced it.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that not very many people do. And that in and of itself is kind of a lonely experience, not to mention just the loneliness of the actual time when I was going through it. Like nobody, literally because of the pandemic, nobody could like be here with me. So it was just an isolating experience then. And I'm just finding that for the most part, some of the things I've been through this year, people just don't relate to or don't have a framework for understanding. I think, if I'm being honest, it's kind of weird, but I think when Dad passed away, I kind of I felt like, oh, I have an excuse to be sad now. It was kind of weird because there were things,
not weird.
There were things that were like,
not weird,
bothering me,
makes
unrelated
sense
to Dad, that I felt like I just couldn't be upset about. And I couldn't be sad about. And finally, it was like, if I was sad about something else, I could just say I'm just sad about Dad. And everybody would be okay with that. But it's almost like
Yeah. So I'm hearing another instance, like again, of not of hiding, but I mean, kind of, but this, I'm having feelings and only certain things are acceptable for me to feel, you know, that are okay with other people. And so if this is happening to me, I need to say, this is why, because then it will be believed or it will be valid or it will be accepted. But if I say what's real, then
Right.
that might not be the case. I might be judged.
Yeah.
I might not be supported if in the same way. I might. And so I hear how it actually gave you some freedom to feel and to feel what was true and not like try to pass it off as something else.
In some ways, and in
In
other
some
ways,
ways,
no,
in
right?
some
Like,
ways. Mm-hmm. But then it allowed you to feel other things that you likewise weren't allowing yourself to feel for
right.
kind of the same reasons and kind of.
I know that we've talked a lot and there's a lot more that could be said. The things coming up for me right now are how I just feel like male partners in particular are just even less equipped than, I mean, maybe it's not a gender thing, but I've been just taking an inventory of a lot of different relationships, whether they were romantic or just, interpersonal relationships with men. And, you know, I don't know what it has been if I quote unquote attract men in my life who have no capacity or desire to be emotionally supportive. And, I think most people generally don't have a very high tolerance or capacity for holding space for people and for just letting people feel that kind of thing. But some of the most painful, at least for me, experiences have been with male friends or mentors or romantic partners. And so it's like that in my partnership right now. I feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. And it's like, I don't know, that's like totally a perception thing. And it's totally I've been here enough times to know that at a certain point, you're going to be sick of this. And I'm just waiting for that. Just like anticipating that, I don't know when, but very soon, I'm going to be too much. And there are already times when that has happened,
Right.
when I've just had to ride that wave. And so there are times when it's like, I don't even want to talk to my partner about what I'm feeling because I don't know if this is going to be a moment when I'm going to be supported. If this is going to be a moment when I'm going to be told,
You're too
yeah,
much.
or just aren't you over that yet? Stop feeling this way. Or, when they're expecting a different kind of experience and you're sad, so you're not able to give them that kind of thing. You know what I mean? I'm not able to be as engaged with my partner
Yeah.
on a date or something because I'm just dealing with some stuff today. And then it's I don't feel like we need to cancel the date. I'm okay just being sad. Can we just keep our plans? But it's if I'm not in a particular mood or whatever, it's I'm ruining things or something. And so, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Like it kind of gets taken personally.
Maybe taken personally or just kind of
It just needs to be a certain way. Like, oh, I only have fun when you're this way. And that's the type of experience I want to have. And if you're not going to be that way, then
yeah.
why bother?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not so much about being together, but more about having a certain kind of experience.
That's what it feels like sometimes. Yeah. Yeah. I think so, but I think the thought didn't fully form. So, that's a whole other conversation. I think it's just, I'm tired of managing other people's expectations, tired of feeling like I have to manage and uphold some kind of an image. Like, I don't necessarily want to do these things. It just feels like things are going to fall apart if I don't. You know? Yeah.
You have to. Like, you have to do it.
It's frustrating when, yeah, it's like that feeling of managing someone else's expectations or managing, like, it's easier. So, the example of like right after dad passed, if I was feeling a certain type of way about something else, it was just easier to say, just thinking about dad, than to talk about something different that I wasn't sure was going to get support. Right. That didn't just.
Right. That wasn't really safe to say.
So, but the same thing, it's the same thing in so many other ways, like the way we filter ourselves to hold back certain information or change certain things to try to minimize as much as possible any kind of negative feedback or attention we might get for something.
Ultimately, pain.
Yeah, to minimize the feelings of not being safe and being hurt. Like, if I was really honest with you about what I think and how I feel about like this particular thing going on, I'm not sure you could handle it. And that would hurt me. So,
them not being able to handle it, or them not being able to like be there with you? Like, so are you managing them as far as like, but in an attempt
to like get the attention off of me,
like help yourself, but
or right, or like most of the time, again, when I'm feeling bad, I don't want to be around people. I want to be alone. Just leave me alone. And so I'll say whatever I need to say about the situation to just be left alone. Right? Because if I'm...
Can I ask you, is it that you want to be alone, or that the people that you're with can't like give you what you need?
It's probably a little bit of both. I mean,
like if someone could be there and be supportive and like just make the space for you and allowed whatever it is that's going on, would you still think, like, do you still think you'd want, I don't know, do you still think you'd want to be alone? Or is it that being alone is better than not being supported in the way that you need?
Well, being alone is definitely better than not getting the support that I'm looking for. 100%. And, being alone also means I don't feel any kind of obligation to care for somebody else, or I don't feel any responsibility towards anyone else because it's just me. And I don't know. Have you ever experienced somebody, a friend or a partner or somebody who like gets overwhelmed by your feelings and then starts themselves having feelings about your feelings? It's not just so much that they don't know what to say. Like, I can handle that. I can handle somebody who doesn't know what to say, who just doesn't know how to.
Right.
Yes. It's like my grief and my emoting in this moment is making you so uncomfortable that now I have to start comforting you. I hate that. I cannot do that.
Right.
I can deal with someone who doesn't understand what I'm going through and doesn't know what to say.
Right.
And just is like, I'll just be here with you. Like, that's enough for me if I want somebody around. But
Mm-hmm.
if
Mm-hmm.
there's work, if I have to do work on top of just like, I'm just trying to survive this moment right now, just trying to get through it. And now I have to care for you too, because my feelings are causing you to feel a certain way. Not my responsibility. Like, it's not fair. And so I think, honestly, that's where I'm at a lot of times is, as long as I can, like,
Right. So you need to take care of you, and the only way to do that right now is
yeah.
to go off, to
But then
withdraw.
that causes its own set of problems, and it's like, apparently I want to deal with that set of problems instead.
Right. It's a cycle.
Right.
It's like a
So I don't
a
really
loop.
know if that means like that I shouldn't have that relationship. Like, I don't really know. I don't know how to have a challenging emotional experience when like my only two options are to isolate and deal with the problems that come with me withdrawing from my relationship, or to try to open up and then deal with the consequences of like the possibility, and because it doesn't happen every time, but the possibility that I'm going to be too overwhelming, and then all of a sudden
Right.
it's going to turn into a whole thing. Like, honestly, that's a lot worse.
Right. Well, it's not just about you, right? It's a dynamic. So there's like the part you play and the part they play. And I hear you. It's like, okay, I'm going to be courageous and I'm going to say what I need to say and I'm going to have my feelings. And then it's on them how they respond and how they handle their feelings. But when it gets to that point of, oh, I feel like I have to manage their feelings to make them stay or to make it be okay, that's their job, and maybe they don't know how to do that. But yeah, it's a dynamic. It's a cycle between two people. It's not just you.
If I withdraw during the experience, I can come back after the experience, and there might be like a little bit of frustration that there hasn't been a lot of connection there. Or I can try to get close during this experience, this emotional experience, open up about it, emote in front of somebody, and then have all of that kind of turned around, and it compounds on top of what I'm feeling and then complicates things for me instead of allowing me to just process and get through it. And that's like 10 times worse experience than just let me go and come back when I'm ready. And so,
Right.
more often than not.
Right. And that's the hard part of relationships is when we have these dynamics that don't work, right? And then it is work for, if you're both on board, it's work for both people. But if it's only huge amounts of work for you, like that still isn't going to work. But it makes sense, like why, especially if you're already feeling overwhelmed, to take the path that would be easier.
Well, and then I, reverse the thing, and I think about like when my partner is going through something of his own. The thing that's frustrating to me is that most of the time my like emotional experiences, like my sadness, grief, the more unpleasant things, my anger, frustration and stuff, is usually about things external to our relationship. Most of his are about our relationship. And so what's difficult for me is like when I am doing okay internally and emotionally and he has an issue, it's like about me. And I'm just like, if you've got like some stress and anger and frustration and stuff about work, about another relationship, like friendship or something, like a family thing or whatever, I can listen all day long. I mean, for the most, I just have a generous amount of capacity for that. But when it's about us and it's about me, it's like I'm already dealing with so many things that now this just feels like something more put on me. I just have a very short, very small capacity for relational tension right now. I don't know if it's a right now thing or if it's a for long-term thing. This is just, I don't, or maybe it's about the particular kinds of conflicts that are coming my way and complaints. But I'm noticing my capacity for certain things is greater or smaller depending on, how personal it is. Maybe that's
exactly
right. Because I'm already dealing with my own stuff. I already have my own self-loathing and stuff that I'm dealing with. I already have,
So complaints just are more ways
Exactly.
of measuring how it's not good enough or not.
No, I almost don't have enough space for my
and
own.
You don't have more space for that.
Yeah.
Right. To wrap this up, to ask, from this conversation, what is either something that you're taking with you, something that you're sitting with, something that you're grateful for?
Well, I'm grateful for you and our relationship and the ways that we've connected over the past few years and grown from being not very close at all to being one of my best friends. So, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm seeing the emotion there, and our relationship means a lot to me too. And I'm glad that we've reconnected and gotten closer. As you said, that hasn't always been the case. And I'm grateful that you were willing to do this with me, to share, to have these conversations. And I think the thing that I'm taking back with me is, again, how two people can have two very different experiences of the same thing, and how our perceptions are, our internal stories and things, how it shapes how we perceive those and what sticks with us. And so I'm just grateful.
Thank you too.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this with me. And now a little bit about Samantha. She lives in Reno, Nevada, where she hikes, paddleboards, and plays volleyball on the beaches of Lake Tahoe. She has been an educator cultivating human potential for 12 years, recently transitioning into an administrative role at a local community college. She has long preferred to express herself through writing and photography. After her divorce and deconversion from Christianity, she has been healing her relationship to her body and rediscovering her childhood love for art, music, and poetry. She also loves to nourish human connection by hosting dinner parties and meeting strangers on her travels. Thank you for being here with us. What really stood out to me was the courage and openness and vulnerability that Samantha displayed as she shared with us. It was an honor to be with her stories, and I invite you to notice any impulse to pathologize, offer advice, or judge. If any part of my story or Samantha's story resonated with you, we would love to hear from you. My intention of listening is not to fix, but to hold space for a person's lived experience, no matter how different it is from my own. Also, if you find yourself in a relationship that's not working for you, I invite you to seek support, to work through any unhelpful dynamics, and to learn some new relational skills. As long as both partners are willing to do the work, unless you're in an abusive situation, breaking up isn't the only answer. However, it is a personal decision and you need to make the right decision for you. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode.